Hello, and welcome to another episode of Laying Down the Lore, a monthly podcast in which we aim to separate our ghouls from our goblins, our snotlings from our Skaven storm fiends, and our bloodthirsters from our bloodletters, and generally ask, what's up with this Warhammer stuff? My name is Ben Crone Barber, and I know fuck all about Warhammer. With me is my co-host Christopher Crallan Allen.
Good morning.
Who also knows fuck all about Warhammer.
Very true.
And my dear brother Darren.
Hello.
Who knows so much about Warhammer, it's a wonder he has time to do anything else. After gathering online to slay some vermin in the name of Sigmar, this dichotomy between our levels of understanding became clear, and this series is an attempt to address that ignorance. Hello, gents.
You're right, me.
So, Dar, before we go on, I mean, it's been a while since we did any fact-checking, and there was one particular fact that I think we realised post-recording that you had maybe got wrong, which was the naming of the Lamian bulls.
Oh, yes. They're the, Lamassu.
Lamassu.
It's the savoury version of tiramisu.
Okay, so, all right, so not Lamian bulls. Apologies to all of our Greek mythology loving fans, all three of you.
And Lamassu listeners.
And the Mesopotamian ones, for which it actually comes from, Greek.
You Philistine.
Yeah, but, the Greek, we apologise to the Greek ones as well, so that's...
We just apologise. We just... general apology to the world.
Yeah, we're sorry. We're sorry. We're sorry for the heightism. We're sorry for our apparent Uncle Semitic...
Anti-Semitic.
Anti-Semitic. Uncle Semitic behaviour. And, implying that you need to be circumcised in order to become a god. It's clearly wrong. It's clearly wrong.
Well, I feel this episode's getting off to a great start.
So moving swiftly on, Kral, what went down last month?
What went down last month was Skaven time.
Tell us what you wrote down last month.
I did. I've even closed WhatsApp and everything just to make this sound as natural as possible. Dhar was educating us about the origins of the Skaven, the first few initial battles. Skaven. Skaven. Yes. You know what I'm talking about.
Do you?
Obviously not. So Darren took us on a journey of the Skaven, their origins, their first few initial battles, and I guess what established them as a, for lack of a better word, an ordered clan, a race, if you like, because before they were just... Their origins actually started with, didn't they attack humans or something? They're like a humanoid hybrid. There was this big mist and people were getting dragged away and by lots of stuff and eyes and people and rats and stuff and eyes.
Again, a kind of close approximation of what was discussed, but
I mean, I was there last month and I barely know what you're talking about.
Okay, I'm just going to read WhatsApp instead. Last episode, we looked at the origins of the Skaven. Their first few wars as they defined their under empire. Their fist few wars, that's not right, as they defined their under empire and then took a brief skim over the clan structures with the power descending from the Council of the 13, the Grey Seers, the four great clans, Skyer, Muldar, Eshin, and Pestilens, and ultimately to the innumerable warlord clans.
Yeah, it took me ages to spell check innumerable.
But you didn't spell check first, though, did you?
Their fist few wars.
The fist few wars. That one slipped under the radar.
But what I do remember is a big fucking church, which a mysterious guy promised to build in one night in return for, was it erecting an idol of his deity or something, or allowing to pray in a certain way?
Yeah, it was for putting a giant bronze bell at the top of the tower, at the top of the steeple, I suppose.
Yeah.
And no one knows still who that person was. Was it an avatar of the Horned Rat himself? Was it one of his Vermin Lord Greater Demons? No one knows. Was it just an angry guy looking for ratty vengeance?
Just a lonely guy looking for someone to hang in his bell. But it was the mother of all steeples or church spires, wasn't it? It breached the clouds. It was huge.
That's exactly right.
It's quite a steeple.
It was monstrous.
I've seen some steeples in my time, but that is wow. That is one steeple. It's a steep steeple.
Eye-wateringly big.
So last month we had all of that. What are we having this month, Dhar?
What's on the menu?
Last month, we ended with the Skaven rising up from the destruction of their city, Skaven Blight, or the destruction of most of their city, and they had started to spread out into the mountain ranges surrounding them, and it brought them into contact with the Dwarven nations, the surface world. They were looking at conflict with humans and orcs and goblins and monsters, so really dangerous. So they wanted to stay underground. So as they expanded their under empire, they eventually came across this kind of rumored massive deposit of warpstone. And as our loyal listeners at this stage, they'd have to be fucking loyal. Our loyal listeners remember that the Skaven have little ratty hard-ons for warpstone. They eat it.
Oh, gross.
The little rat lipstick pops out.
I think that's how your fiance describes yours, isn't it, Chris?
Little ratty lipstick.
A little ratty hard-on.
Get it away from me, Chris.
So the Skaven consume it in great levels, the warpstone, not the hard-ons. And in discovering this enormous deposit of warpstone, they came into conflict with our Lord and Saviour, the great Lord of the Undead, Nagash. And this happened at a site called Cripple Peak. Pause for inappropriate comments.
Holding.
No, Darren, we're above that now.
Is that a height joke again?
It's crippleism, isn't it?
Yeah. We're above that because we can stand.
Oh.
So the Skaven, completely avaricious, want the massive deposit of warpstone and are facing the great necromancer's undead legions. So they begin a decades-long war to try and gain control of the deposit of warpstone. So you can imagine this conflict rages in and around and on top of a mountain that's been, to use a great phrase, cleft in twain. So there are huge deposits of warpstone littering the surface, even bigger deposits underground. There's constant war between the dead and the Skaven in tunnels and on the surface. So it's literally a bloodbath. The place is just awash, and the ground eventually turns a kind of iron red from all the blood that's shed.
I'm assuming the blood that's shed is only on the side of the Skaven.
Pretty much, yeah. The problem the Skaven have, even though they have, again, my favourite word today, innumerable, they have innumerable Skaven, like generations after generations are just living and dying purely to...
Wave after wave of my own men.
Yeah. They really are the Zap Brannigan of the Warhammer world. They really are. But they're facing off against a slightly smaller but ever-increasing army of the dead, because as the Skaven die, their bodies are reanimated by Nagash and sent back in to fight their former comrades, sometimes almost immediately.
Holy shit, so you've got undead Skaven?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Oh, bugger me with a fish fork, that sounds amazing.
There used to be a regiment you could buy for Warhammer Fantasy Battle, the kind of rank and file game that Games Workshop was famous for at the time, which had a mixture of undead types. So you had humans, dwarves, elves, goblins. I think there was a halfling, or it may be a goblin, and there was Skaven and orc as well.
That's so cool. I really want to see
it was really good. It was a really good unit.
We should get a photo of that in the old show notos.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'll dig it out. So this combat meat grinder, no one is getting the upper hand, or more correctly, I suppose, Nagash remains in possession of the warpstone deposits. So the Council of 13 begin to scheme, and they look to Clan Scryer, which we touched on very briefly last time, and these are the kind of chaotic steampunk engineers of the Skaven race. For players of Vermintide, these are the chaps with the warp fire throwers, with the poisoned wind globe throwers.
Bunch of bastards they are.
They really are. And so it was about that time that the warp fire thrower came into regular use. So you just imagine if you're in this tunnel, which is swarming with 4-foot-high armored rats and zombies and skeletons, and then suddenly the entire thing is bathed in a green magical fire, which destroys you not only physically, but perhaps spiritually, socially, existentially, perhaps as well.
Financially.
Morally.
So in addition to these tunnel fighting pieces of equipment and the globe throwers, they start bringing out what's called the warp lightning cannons and even larger engines of destruction. A warp lightning cannon it looks like a trebuchet, but instead of the swinging arm, it's got a fixed warpstone powered laser lightning cannon.
Pew, 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 pew.
Pachoo, pachoo.
And it will F your day up. But Nagash has...
Sorry, so how does that work then? So it's a kind of trebuchet, and it fires a laser, which then the trebuchet kind of flings in a direction, and it'll cut a line in that direction. Is that right?
No, sorry. It looks like a trebuchet.
I don't think it's like a trebuchet at all. I think it's just more of a wooden cannon.
Oh, I see. A wooden camel?
Scrap trebuchet.
He just said it because it's a fun word to say, isn't it?
No, because the framework is similar. But as I had said, if you had listened, instead of the swinging arm, it has a green laser cannon.
Right, okay. Yeah, no, I didn't listen.
It's more like a clothes horse than a trebuchet, isn't it? Like a fixed, rigid structure, albeit with a big warpstone on top of it. Plop.
Yeah, like a siege tower sort of thing, but smaller, and not a siege tower. I'm going to shut up now.
We're just being difficult, Darren.
Do I even need to be here? So against these enormous siege engines, Nagash had already figured that Skaven would pull some sort of ratty shenanigans, and using his own store of warpstone and his necromantic power and his dark magic, which we all remember is powered by the wind of Dhar, he short circuits all of their war engines.
Nice.
So there is some sort of magical EMP device he sets off.
That's very cool.
Which blitzes all their technology, and then they're just, the undead just wash over them.
Then they're just a bunch of rats.
Yeah. Just a bunch of rats then at that stage, just a bunch of dead rats.
Shit, okay.
So they shift their tactics, the Skaven, being cunning as they are, and they begin to attack all the human tribes that are attached to Nagash's empire. So if you can imagine, he's got this, what effectively looks like an even more evil version of Sauron's tower in Lord of the Rings, Barad-dûr, the shores of this kind of poisoned lake. And just adjacent to the tower is this enormous broken mountain with a huge amount of warpstone in it. So surrounding that are a load of human tribes, kind of barbaric tribes, that will eventually devolve into cannibalism and become the ghouls and ghasts of the Warhammer world. So they end up with this kind of horrible cannibalistic half-life. And so they kept attacking the tribes, trying to destroy them or to force them to rebel against Nagash. But to an individual, all of these humans feared Nagash more than they feared their own death.
So how did the Skaven try to get them to attack Nagash? Did they kind of like go and attack them like dressed as the undead, like in a skeleton outfit? Like it was Halloween or something?
I think it's going to be to destroy all the resources so that they're left with no option but to rebel against their master. But there may have been instances of bribery. There may have been instances of one Skaven sitting on another Skaven's shoulders with a trench coat. All this kind of stuff.
Glasses. Just like wobbling really up like, hello, sir. Did you know Nagash called your mother a hamster?
Yeah. So while all this is going on, there's the constant kind of meat grinder, as I said, warfare in and around Cripple Peak. And this is now lasting almost a century. So potentially millions of Skaven have just been chewed up and spat out by the undead jaws of Nagash's legion.
Sad times.
Wow.
Sad times.
That is a horrible fate, isn't it?
They're beginning to realize that they're running out of resources, and their desire to gain all that warpstone, they may not have the resources to be able to conquer Cripple Peak and may have to withdraw. And as the Council of 13 are discussing what to do, they receive an envoy from Nagash. So he sends one of his lieutenants. So the envoy from Nagash offers them a deal that if they can supply his master with as many orcs as possible, he will give them wagon loads of warpstone in return.
Oh.
Good deal.
So the war dies down and is replaced by a commercial solution where Skaven are now wandering the hills and countrysides in and around not only Nagashizzar, which is the name of Nagash's fortress, but all over the Old World and the Badlands and across to the Darklands and the Border Princes, or what will become the Border Princes. And they just begin enslaving hundreds of thousands of orcs and goblins and delivering them to the undead legions of Nagash.
I can't imagine how the little shrimpy Skaven can like even overpower one orc. I guess it's just sheer numbers, isn't it? You're just fucking like 20 Skaven to one orc kind of thing. No problem. Yeah.
And then what? They knock them out and drag them back. I mean, the logistics of this are kind of a bit mind-boggling.
It is, but you've got to keep in mind at this stage that the Skaven Under Empire really is the largest transport network in the whole of Warhammer history, and I suspect remains so right up until the end times. So as soon as they will have captured orcs, they'll be chained up. I mean, this is where I think we'd mentioned Clan Moulder last time, which are the great beastmasters and slave pen owners. So this is where Clan Moulder really come into their own.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Transporting huge numbers of slaves back through. And I suspect there's some, they're not transporting them back to Skavenblight. They're not going back to their capital, so they're not ending up in any kind of dangerous situation where there's more slaves than there's more orcs than there are Skaven in any one position, because they're just, handing them over to the undead lords underneath Nagash and then getting, bright green rocks in return.
A buttload of drugs.
Yeah. Well, really, it's more like they're getting a load of refresher sweets.
So I see a big problem on the horizon here for the Skaven, because if you're delivering a bunch of live, what they see as bad guys, to other bad guys who are going to turn them into undead in exchange for rocks, eventually, while the Skaven's desire for warpstone is never going to be sated, Nagash's desire for orcs possibly could be, at which point he will have a ridiculous army and he will just absolutely annihilate the Skaven. I mean, nobody was thinking ahead here, were they?
When you got a hankering for warpstone like the Skaven have,
no.
You don't think about that, do you? You just think about the next wheelbarrow full of green nomminess.
Yeah. Just give me another hit. Yeah. It's how you feel about ass spiders, isn't it?
Oh, mate. Oh, mate. It's just... oh, my God. I can relate.
Well, I mean, you guys have touched on it with a needle. So the Council of 13 have the same concerns. So they begin a series of kind of spy networks. I don't know if it was exclusively Skaven, but the Skaven do have a habit of recruiting human agents as well, suborning them with kind of bribes. And then, I mean, it's the same in the real world. Once you're bribed, whoever bribed you effectively owns you, because they can reveal your ne'er-do-welledness at any time.
If you were a human, what could a Skaven offer you as a bribe? Bit of mouldy cheese.
Yeah, mouldy cheese, warpstone, or they can kill whoever is your enemy or whoever is obstructing your rise to power, and so on.
Gotcha.
Don't the human races not believe in the Skaven? Isn't that one of the weird twists in the Warhammer world? Like the Empire don't believe or refuse to believe they exist.
Yeah, and that's really a result of the efforts of the Skaven to have it that way. I mean, if you've got someone in a position who you've managed to place in a position of power and they are in your debt, you can get them to just nix any mention of Skaven in any report that comes across your desk.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
So while this commercial venture is happening and the rising concern of the Council of 13 that these bulky orcs may turn into bulky orc zombies or bulky orc skeletons and come back and smash their heads in, the only real thing that's noticed, the only real thing that is brought back to their attention is that there was an enormous fleet that left the Nagashizzar via the Sour Sea, which is the name of the body of water that it's on the shores of, and that fleet headed south and was gone for a year. About halfway through that year, there was an incredible storm. Once that passed, and it seemed to all intents and purposes to be perhaps a magically enhanced storm, but nonetheless a natural phenomenon, or looked to be a natural phenomenon, the Bone Fleet returned. And it returned with a single prisoner. It didn't come back with any treasure. It didn't come back with huge amounts of slaves. It didn't come back with anything. It was a single human prisoner.
That sounds really inefficient. They went on a raid and brought back a single prisoner.
Think about the legions of undead badgers they could have brought back if they'd have,
I mean, Jesus. Try harder, guys.
I know.
Well, I think what had happened was they'd been on a huge holiday and they'd come back, but they'd forgotten to get Nagash a present, so they just went to the, like a petrol station.
Mate, let's just grab that fridge magnet. No, come on, he'll know he'll know we didn't think about it. All right, we'll grab that dude instead.
I won't just make up a story about who he is.
Grab the guy that makes the fridge magnets. Got him. Right, go. Give a man a fridge magnet, and he shall hang a picture of his daughter's cat that she drew. Bring the man that makes the fridge magnets, and
he can hang himself with the fridge magnets.
He can have a fridge magnet for months. Donate £3 a day now to sponsor Fridge Magnet Man.
Is your boss stopping you from getting that promotion? Is your wife cheating on you with some low-life scumbag? Or did someone just plain shit in your cereal? Well, there's one thing these motherfuckers all have in common. That's right, you can have them all killed. Hi, I'm Barry Snuffleupagus. That's right, Snuffleupagus, don't fucking laugh. You might remember me from other adverts such as Rent-A-Plague or Rat Ogres of Us, businesses that are 100% nothing to do with them rat men and myths. What the fuck is a Skaven anyhow? But enough of this chit-chat, let's talk about Eshin Exterminators, the one-stop shop for all your assassination needs. If the price is right, nothing is out of the question. Maybe your boss accidentally brutally cuts his own head off while shaving. Maybe that bitch wife and a shithead lover are incinerated in some freak yachting accident involving a wayward badger and a faulty fucking toaster. Maybe that serial shitter accidentally slips and falls ass first onto a conveniently placed blunderbuss that fires so much cereal up his hole his head pops like a fucking balloon. Anything could happen. One thing's for certain though, Clan Eshin had nothing to do with it. Who the fuck are Clan Eshin, I hear you say? Exactly. And don't worry about the company name either, that's just a fucking coincidence, you hear me? Eshin Exterminators. We take out the trash so you don't have to. Alright, you get that? Get it back? Alright, great. Barry Snuffleupagus signing off. I gotta go pick up my payoff from that Skaven age around the corner. Or should I say small furry man? Am I right? Yeah, this guy gets it, he gets it. Alright, I'm out of here. I'm out.
So on the tail of the return of this single human prisoner, the Skaven spies and scouts noticed an enormous river of undead walking, kind of trudging really, from the south up to Nagash. And what's written in the various army books is that this river of dead was constituted millions of humans. So a sheer enormous power surge to Nagash's forces.
Oh, they weren't marching against Nagash. They were bolstering his forces.
Yes, and the Skaven are obviously terrified. But as this happens, silence descends over Nagashizzar, over Nagash's own fortress. And it's at this stage the Council of 13 realize that they have to act. He's become too powerful. He's got millions of additional zombies and skeletons and undead heading towards him. He's got a huge number of orcs. He's got an enormous contingent of cannibalistic ghouls that are just frenzied. And he still has possession of possibly the largest warpstone deposit in the history of the world. So his power is unrivaled.
The dude's unstoppable.
When you said silence fell on Nagash's fortress, what kind of sounds were going on before? Like, how noisy was it that the sudden silence made them go, ooh, it's quite silent?
Well, there was no more... The undead weren't moving. They were just standing still. So there was no, like, patrols. The sentries were just stood stock still.
The mariachi band had fallen silent.
That's possibly the most unnerving thing you could see in a tunnel. It's just this completely still mariachi band.
Mid-performance.
Ponchos and hats and stuff.
Oh, man.
So what was the crack then? What were they all doing?
So the council decided that they needed to make use of any ally they could make within Nagashizzar. There were no living humans that could, be turned against Nagash for hundreds of miles in every direction. They were all either undead or were ghouls or cannibals.
So not only was his forces growing, his enemies, at least in the immediate vicinity, were disappearing as well. So his monopoly on the land was just getting bigger. So
yeah, exactly right.
Ooh. Hate to be on the bad side of Nagash.
Yeah, and they realized that in that moment, he was the most powerful being on the planet. Perhaps even rivaling one of the Slan.
Wow. Shit.
And so they were left with no choice. They had to act. And a plan was formed that involved the single human prisoner who had been kept alive, tormented, tortured, teased, tickled, and other T words.
Tantalized.
Toasted.
Toasted, touted.
Tromboned.
Oh, that's an Amnesty International call right there. I've been tromboned.
Tangoed.
Without directly contacting the prisoner, the Skaven Council decided to use him as a kind of meat puppet to attack Nagash. So they forged the single most deadly sword that's ever been made in Warhammer history, called the Fellblade. And this was something that was more warpstone than metal, and riddled, I say, with extremely dark, potent magics that disrupted not only other people's magic, but would drain the life force of anything that touched it or that it was stabbed with, which means that the life force of the bearer would be drained from them.
What, just by holding the handle of it?
Just by holding the handle over a prolonged period of time. If you were stabbed with it, you're done. But if you're holding the handle, it will just drain your life force slowly over time.
So who is this bloke, by the way?
Do you not remember? Have you not put two and two together? We've been told this story already, Chris. Do you not remember?
I'll use his name at the end of it.
Okay.
So using, their best scouts, their best agents, the Skaven infiltrate Nagashizzar, which is even more unnerving than normal because nothing's moving. They unlock the prisoner's cell and just leave the sword right in front of him. And as soon as he picks up the sword, he is effectively possessed by the collective sorceries of the Council of 13. So they have a direct link. They've like Wi-Fi directly into him.
Bluetoothed, yeah.
Well, green-toothed, really, if it's warpstone.
Green-fanged.
Nice.
Green-fanged.
Nice.
They don't control him completely because he has enormous willpower, but they are able to set up illusions, post-hypnotic suggestions, that kind of thing. And so he's guided through the tunnels, and I like to think that he's not perhaps visibly surrounded by Skaven, but if you can imagine, there is just a boundary or a perimeter of the elite of Skaven warriors clearing the way for him. But they don't have to do anything because everything is perfectly still. He eventually comes to Nagash's throne room to find the great necromancer effectively comatose on his throne, just kind of sitting slouched, exhausted from casting the single largest spell that's ever been cast, certainly in human lore.
Was. Right. I was wondering why everything was a bit exhausted.
Exhausted.
Right.
And as he raises the sword to bring it down and kill the necromancer, some sense or some soul or spirit wrapped up in Nagash is made aware of it, and he raises his arm to ward off the blow, and it severs his hand at the wrist.
Snip.
And so the hand effectively just scuttles off into the darkness.
Well, like Thing from Adam's Family.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So Nagash starts to fight back with spells and blistering curses and kind of dead looks and that kind of idea.
You ruddy bugger! You'll never get my other hand.
Damn it! But the Council of 13 are protecting their kind of human agent, and so he's surrounded by this sphere of pure power that's shielding him from the most dangerous being on the planet. Now, as this is happening, council members start dropping dead because of the feedback, the power of Nagash's magic.
Wow.
Is going through the human and striking them down.
That's the power of Greentooth, man. It is the number one for wireless transmission.
Broadband, online, all the time, never drops below 100 meg per second.
It's the future, mate. It's the future.
The future.
Well, I feel a Greentooth advert coming on.
I think so.
This shit just writes itself.
I think we just gave them, a rave review, and I expect them to be on the phone in the next few weeks.
But as the Council of 13 are protecting their agent, he's still chopping and chopping, and eventually Nagash succumbs to his wounds, and he falls down, for want of a better word, deader than he was already. But it's driven the prisoner insane, so he wanders.
I mean, he was a mess before. He'd been tortured and tantalized and tangoed and tromboned.
Yeah. So the Skaven ignore him, and he's still holding the sword, and it's kind of dragging behind him on the one assumes the cobbles as he walks out into the kind of shores of the Sour Sea and then out into the Badlands. As he's leaving the fortress in a haze, these elite Skaven scouts and warriors leap onto the remains of Nagash and just absolutely go to town. It's like Gordon Ramsay times 1,000, just hacking away, swearing and adjusting.
You idiot sandwich!
Nagash is rendered into thousands of little pieces, no bigger than an ice cube or no bigger than a tiny ice cube. And they pick up all these pieces and throw them into the kind of warp fire powered forges that are held in Nagashizzar. And he's effectively just rendered into smoke.
Poof.
And thus passed the greatest threat to the world that the world never knew about.
Wow.
He's gone.
And all he needed was to be diced into a majillion little pieces and thrown into warpstone and turned into smoke.
It's so obvious when you hear it, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. Simple process.
Simples.
It's like baking. It's like baking. So simple. So simple. Just a few simple ingredients that he needed to be turned into.
So just a couple of more points there on this one. The prisoner, who was named Prince Alcadizzar, he was the last prince of Nehekara, the Egyptian-y realm. And Nagash had fallen into a coma because he had just not only killed the whole country, that was his country of birth, but then reanimated them. And that was a portion of that population was heading to him. Because he was killed before the great ritual could be fully completed, the Skaven are responsible effectively for the creation of the land of the dead, the Tomb Kings.
So are you saying that if he had been able to finish the ritual and bond or tie or whatever the term is, all of those undead to his will, and then trombone millions of undead to his will, and then he was killed, would all of those undead have just died as well? If he was then killed after they'd been tied to his will?
You can't kill the undead.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a tricky question because in the game, if you kill an undead army's general, invariably every unit loses an amount of models because control is lost. Right. I think the Great Ritual, as it's known, was still so fresh that it was still an animating force for the undead.
And is that why you would blame the Skaven for it then? Because they interrupted that ritual, and had they killed Nagash after, then you wouldn't see the kind of numbers of undead that we have today?
It's a great question. I don't have an answer. I don't know if it's been addressed at all. It's certainly not in anything I've read. I think that once the Great Ritual washed over the world, it was focused on Nehekara, but it doesn't seem to have gone beyond that. But I certainly think that at that point, it affected the dark wind of magic in some fashion, because if you recall, the winds of magic kind of settle in places that are associated with their abilities, their governance, the things they kind of control. So you would start seeing in the kind of bogs and fens and dark places, zombies, relatively mindless, walking around, just existing to eat. Skeletons, perhaps if there are skeletons of soldiers, which in the games, that's what they invariably look like. They're just following their last kind of order. So a lot of them are just patrolling and may see everyone as an enemy, but may not.
When you said that the Skaven were responsible then really for the undead, what did you mean by that?
Oh, sorry. I think the Skaven were principally responsible for the independence of the Tomb King.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they're responsible for breaking the link, the control between Nagash and the population of Nehekara.
The only known instance of Greentooth failing.
Yes.
Which, there's been a strong PR campaign to, subdue that information.
And they've learned a lot from it. We're sorry, and we've learned many, many lessons. Greentooth 2.0 is going to be much stronger, faster, reliable.
And warpstone-y.
Making the impossible
probable.
With Greentooth.
Is then the control of the undead in the hands of the Tomb Kings arguably better than in the hands of Nagash?
Depends who you are, right?
If you're the Tomb Kings, sure.
I think the Tomb Kings have a strong cultural identity, which is the pseudo-Egyptian kind of background. I think they retain their hierarchy. So the kings and queens that were buried in pyramids were reanimated as part of the ritual, and they then remained kings and queens. And the hierarch priests and priestesses, effectively the population of Nehekara, or the land of the dead as it is now, retained their social awareness and their social status. I think the skeletons, the kind of rank and file, are effectively mindless. They may have unit leaders that have some sense of identity, but they're all under the control of an already existing social hierarchy.
Right.
Whereas Nagash simply wanted to create a land of the dead, where he and his trusted lieutenants were the only ones with any form of sentience.
Was Nagash undead himself at that point?
He had become undead at that stage. Yes, he was a lich king.
That's right. Was he killed, or did he just bring about his own original end as part of his spells and experiments? I can't remember.
Well, let us progress, and we'll find out.
Woohoo! Let's do it.
Woohoo! So 3 points to be made at the end of this, the War of Cripple Peak. Firstly, Skaven now controlled the single largest warpstone deposit in the whole of Warhammer World, and it was given to a clan called Clan Rikek, and they occupied Nagashizzar and Cripple Peak and renamed the whole complex as Fortress Rikek.
It's not easy to say.
It's not, is it? Fortress
Rikek. Say that 5 times really fast. Fortress Rikek. Fortress Rikek. Fortress Rikek. Fortress Rikek.
The second thing is that it took the Skaven a little bit of time to track down the Mad Prince as he wandered through, and he was eventually found collapsed face down in a river and was never recovered. That's how he passed from history. You know, arguably the greatest prince ever to come out of Nehekhara. Certainly, perhaps not rivaling Nagash in his power, but certainly in his willpower. The defiance that character showed was unbelievable. But the Skaven, and this is the third point, the Skaven retook or reclaimed the Fellblade, and you can actually use that in games. There's rules for using the Fellblade in the Warhammer games, and there are also rules for using the Hand of Nagash, because that is now an artifact as well.
Oh, they found it, did it? Where did it scuttle off to?
It scuttled off. I think it was found together with the kind of crown of Nagash
just groping a Skaven.
Just massaging the head of one. It just became really domesticated and friendly. And just was giving head massages to random Skaven.
It was just found doing like shadow puppets in the room on its own.
No, it was just really angry. It was giving the finger to everyone.
Yeah.
That was really reckless of the Skaven, just to let the prince with the most powerful blade in the history of Warhammer just to wander off. And so they were getting really into dismembering and slicing and dicing up Nagash into a billion gajillion pieces, turned around out of their kind of frenzy. It was like, where's Bob? I thought you were looking at him. No, I thought you were looking after him. Well, don't look at me. Fuck. We're in so much trouble. Bob. Oh, Bob.
If the council find out about this, we are screwed.
Bob, come on, Bob. Come on, man.
It does make me wonder, just in terms of the Hand of Nagash, and it's certainly a question I've never thought of before this record, is what is the sound of one hand tromboning? Does it go just one way and not the other? So it goes,
So Alcadizzar, I'm assuming from Chris's story, is his second name, so it's Bob Alcadizzar. Robert Alcadizzar.
Bob Alcadizzar, yeah.
Alcadizzar.
Alcadizzar.
I think I had one of them when I had an upset stomach. Bob Alka-Seltzer.
Bob Alka-Seltzer.
Alka-Seltzer, Alcazar.
Nagash was killed by Alka-Seltzer. I love it.
Defeats indigestion, heartburn, and Nagash.
It's quite a sad story, isn't it? He just kind of wandered off and then died in a river, face down.
Yeah, that's really unglamorous, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah. But I bet his trousers were down as well. He was just taking a piss in the river.
He did a Whitney Houston.
Fucking collapse. And they just found, all they could see was like his buttocks sticking out of the water when they found it.
Really undignified.
That's not the way you want to be found, isn't it?
Chris, did you just say he did a Whitney Houston?
I said no such thing.
Oh, God, Chris.
And then Ben said he was ended up face down in water with his ass up in the air. What exactly is going on here?
And that's more of a Michael Barrymore situation, isn't it? Yeah. Sorry. Excuse me.
Oh, dear.
Oh, I need to lie down.
You should laugh.
I've just got a vision of him just falling into the river, and from nowhere, this hand pops up and goes. Wah, wah.
They actually found Nagash's hand just on his arse when they found it.
Just massaging it.
in him. Yeah, just one finger.
And people walking past weren't surprised. They thought it was just another ass spider junkie.
How many ass spiders are you on today, Chris?
I've cut down to 3 in the morning now.
3.
Three.
Is it? Right.
Yeah, I'm just preparing the 4th.
Are you having any like side effects or anything?
Oh yeah, it's all about the side effects.
Like whispering teeth. And...
Daytime night terrors.
Skryacom Green Tooth Technology has the power to change your world. Everyone and everything connecting in real time. Giving you the freedom to go farther than you ever imagined. With the reach to keep you connected when it matters most. And the power to make even the most crowded nests and swarms yours to share. Discover Skryacom Green Tooth Technology on our award-winning mobile network.
So thus passed possibly the greatest changer to the Warhammer world since the collapse of the Polar Gates. So, some 500 years after this, the Skaven had just been kind of milling around, kind of, gnawing on all the warpstone, expanding their under-empire, which is not a euphemism. They come to what's known as the War of Karak Eight Peaks. And so what happened was, the Skaven had really turned their attention to the dwarves and the dwarven holds, because the dwarves were the only other race with a really large under-empire, or underway, as it's known by the dwarves. And the dwarven realm, which is known as Karaz Angkor, was this huge conglomeration of various dwarven mines, cities, the enormous dwarven holds, and the roads, the enormous underways that connect them all. And the Skaven really wanted a piece of that action. But the dwarves, being the redoubtable beings that they were, really held off the Skaven for generation after generation. This saw the rise of a specialist set of dwarf warriors called the Ironbreakers. And these were warriors that were head to dwarven toe in iron, with massive shields, really, really jaggy sharp axes, and even their beards were armoured. And these were specialist tunnel fighters that would hold the line against the great Skaven hordes.
Amazing.
They sound hard as nuggets.
Are there figures for those guys?
Yeah, and they really are nuggets, Chris. They're super hard. They spend decades protecting the dwarven underway and just constant tunnel fighting against Skaven and night goblins and the monsters that dwell in all these caverns in Warhammer.
Oh, nice.
So the Skaven, the Council of 13, once again decide to use sneaky ratty tactics. And what they do is they begin attacking the surface encampments of dwarves, so like dwarven logging settlements, farming settlements, and small outposts, small fortresses on the surface. And what they end up doing is they're driving the dwarf population back into their holds, back into their underway, the under empire of the dwarves. And they do this not only by making a direct attack against the dwarves themselves with their little Skaveny regiments, but they also coordinate is probably the wrong word. They influence orc and goblin tribes to stop fighting amongst themselves and to go hammer and tongs at the dwarves. So you see these great orc and goblin tribes just descending on settlements and laying siege to great holds to keep them distracted, while the Skaven attack from below and try and breach through the literal iron wall of the Ironbreaker regiments that are defending the dwarven holds and settlements. This then turns into a protracted siege of an entire empire, where resources are getting thinner and thinner for the dwarves, and they not only are reduced to eating, horrible little cave mushrooms, but also they're begin to lose fortress after fortress, settlement after settlement, until things begin to look really dire. And this really does shake the confidence of the dwarves, who are, they're not without confidence.
It's quite, God, Skaven are cunning, aren't they?
Yeah, really cunning and sly,
Really
and actually,
sly.
yeah.
Love it.
I'm starting to.
So
respect
once
them a bit
again,
more.
hold on.
Hold on. We're gonna have to.
I don't like
pause
them,
that.
Ben. They're still
that
a
again,
bunch
Chris.
of rats,
Yeah,
but
go on.
they are gaining my nods of approval.
Okay, excellent. I'll take it.
Nice one, Skaven. Nice. But they
Yes.
are. They are actually. They're not just mindless hordes of minions, are they?
You have not mispronounced their name once this episode, other than
Skaven.
that time right at the start where you did it comically.
Mispronounced the name, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Let me correct myself. Skaven. I've really.
So as the war progresses, the Council of 13 once again taps their mad scientist, Clan Scryer, and they bring regiments worth of warp fire throwers and poison wind globadiers, or globadiers, depending on how you feel. And so these are the machines that were used to great effect in the tunnels beneath Cripple Peak. And it absolutely overwhelms the Ironbreakers, the dwarves. They literally melt in their armor.
Ooh,
And so then
gross.
underground fortresses and underground fastnesses and holds begin to fall. And while everything is being done to keep the dwarves under siege, both above and below the surface, once again, Skaven scouts and assassins manage to get into dwarf holes, and particularly Karak Eight Peaks itself, and they drop huge chunks of unrefined warpstone into the massive water vaults and the cisterns that the dwarves use for water. And therefore, over 6 months to a year, it enfeebles the dwarves. The dwarves get weaker and weaker because they're being poisoned by the water that they think is safe. They still don't know it's been tampered with. And so you have now at Karak Eight Peaks, the orcs coming in from the surface, the Skaven coming up from below, and each dwarf citizen, man, woman, and child, is being dissolved from the inside slowly by warpstone.
Jesus.
And eventually they fall. The dwarven warriors fall one after another. The orcs get in. The Skaven rise up from below. And Karak Eight Peaks falls. And this really is a hammer blow to the psyche of the dwarves, who before now had thought their kingdom was inviolate. The great Karak, the Everpeak, the capital of the Dwarven Empire, is now under siege in a similar fashion. And significant dwarven fortresses and cities begin to fall over the next couple of centuries, one after another.
Wow. Using the same techniques?
Using the same technique.
I gotta say, I'm a bit ashamed. It doesn't seem like... I mean, I know that the Skaven are, devious, but that is a fucking... No, that's not a fair fight, is it? Like, the Dwarves don't even know why they're losing.
Yeah.
Just... that being poisoned thing is... poor sportsmanship.
Yeah, it must feel like all of their ancestors and all of their gods have abandoned them.
Yeah. Yeah, dark times. Man.
Psychological warfare right there.
Yeah. It is in the books that once the dwarves started to become enfeebled, The Skaven, just from Clan Moulder, if everyone recalls, that's the kind of Beastmasters, just released hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of starving rats into the fortress. And so it very much looked like that scene from Lord of the Rings when they come into Moria, where the dwarven bodies are just, attacked and gnawed and what have you. It's the thing that no one really considers all that much when they're playing the games. It's horrific.
It's pretty gnarly.
Yeah, it's pretty gnarly.
So that's really got us to the stage where about 300 years before the rise of Sigmar and the formation of the Empire itself. So we've still got quite a significant way to go, because we've got to get not only past these 300 years, but then we've got to add on another 2,500 just for shits and giggles to get up to date.
Nice. I'll clear my schedule.
So I think the last thing we'll cover today is the first great Skaven civil war.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the end of the second decade after the Empire has started. So it's written down in the books as it's the year 17 to 600 by the imperial calendar. So effectively 600 years of constant civil war, with the Skaven really focused inwards. Very, perhaps not isolationist, but their primary concern is their own society, their own structure. A couple of hundred years before the event, so somewhere between the fall or the beginning of the end of the Dwarven Underway, there was an unnamed clan of Skaven had trudged down into the Southlands, which, if everyone remembers, is analogous with our own Africa. And they came across the ruins of a lizardman city, a Slan city. And in those ruins, they found an enormous tunnel entrance. And trudging down through and traveling, they discovered that tunnel led all the way underneath the ocean and underneath Ulthuan, and arrived in Lustria, in, again, what we would consider South America.
South America, yeah.
So they arrived in the kind of fetid, teeming jungles of Lustria. And they were immediately set upon by everything that was poisonous that lived there, which, again, if you read all the books, is everything that lives there. And so they were set upon by spiders, both ass spiders, perhaps shoulder spiders, I don't know, and neck spiders, and scorpions, and serpents, and lizard men as well.
Badgers?
Maybe jungle badgers.
Jadgers.
Jadgers. So the Skaven begin to succumb to disease and decay, and there's boils appear on them, and huge chunks of fur fall out, and bones start becoming exposed, but they're all still alive, and they're constantly praying to the horned rat to save them.
Why didn't they just go back through the fucking tunnel?
They'd be dead before they even got halfway. The disease was just devouring them. And they were constantly under attack by the forces of the lizardmen. And eventually their leaders began just to capture lizardmen and sacrifice them to the horned rat. And they began to feel a little bit better. So they sacrificed more and more and more. And ultimately, about 600 or 700 miles in every direction, nothing existed except the Skaven and perhaps plant life, because they had sacrificed everything they could find to the great glory of the horned rat. And this stage, Ben, is where you use your catchphrase.
Post hoc ergo propter hoc?
No, big up the horned rat, you fool.
Oh, big up the horned rat. I've got so many.
So as they were sacrificing all these lizard men, especially the smaller ones, the skinks, this, unfortunately, Ben, gave rise to the great god Sotek, the enemy of Skaven, who runs various cities in Lustria now, which exist only to sacrifice Skaven in the name of the old ones.
Oh, so them doing all this sacrifice actually gave rise to Sotek.
It gave focus, much like in the first or second episode, we discussed how the constant repetitive behavior eventually ended up coalescing into a chaos god or
Yes,
into a human god, that kind of idea.
Yeah.
So they gave rise to their own nemesis, the great snake god Sotek.
It's the Warhammer nature's way of balancing things, right?
Yeah. That's amazing. Right, okay.
So as the worship of Sotek increased, the frenzy with which the lizard men attacked the Skaven also increased, and they were eventually driven back to a city called Quetzal, which is a temple city in Lustria, with the usual step pyramids and catatonic god frogs, that kind of idea. They had to endure an enormous siege, which they were eventually able to break only by realizing that if they stayed in Lustria, they would all be wiped out. And so they fled the continent, and it took them constant warfare for 10 years to get to the coast, where they built an enormous plague fleet and sailed back to sunny Old World. Now, when they arrived on the shores of the Old World, you've got to keep in mind that they'd been effectively missing for hundreds of years. Exactly 200 years, in fact. So the Skaven didn't know who these diseased Skaven were. I beg your pardon, they didn't land in the Old World. They landed on the continents on that side. So they actually landed in the Southlands, analogous with Africa. And they began trying to assert their dominance and trying to get back in with Skaven culture. So they had sent many envoys up to Skavenblight to talk to the Council of 13, all of which were killed, and proclamations about traitors and wars and usurpers were issued, and this then triggered the Skaven Civil War. And you'd think to yourself, how much damage could one clan actually do? Fair enough, they're the love children of a rat and a diseased fat person.
And a sepsis god.
Sepsis god. So how much damage could they actually do? Well, as they worked back up through the Southlands, they came across many Skaven clans in the various sites of the Under Empire, and they gave them a simple choice: join us or be sacrificed to the Horned Rat by our plague priests.
What's the catch?
Yeah.
This seems like a win-win.
This is too good to be true. And it normally is.
And you say I get a free pair of knives with this?
If it smells like a plague rat and it looks like a plague rat.
So they worked their way back up into the Old World through the Southlands, gaining a huge following, and effectively a third of the Skaven Empire joined them.
Wow.
And I'm trying to imagine the sheer scale of warfare that must have happened with millions of Skaven on either side.
In its finest. You get one guy just going, sacrifice the Horned Rat or join us. Now, you asked 2 people each. And you asked 2 more people. And they asked 2 more people. Time, share.
So were they all then Clan Pestilens? Did they all become plague-ridden Ratman, or was it like Clan Pestilens and then a bunch of guys that said, yeah, we'll go with you, but they weren't necessarily plagued?
The short answer is yes. You had some clans that joined Clan Pestilens as plague monks, and you then had what's called the warlord clans, which allied with Clan Pestilens. So it's things like they would wear the same color so they could be identified in battle, so their clan logos and clan colors took on a more diseased palette, but they were still straight up just warlords rather than plague monks.
Nice. Okay.
So as they progressed up through the Southlands, all communication with Fortress Rikek, which was known formerly as Cripple Peak, is lost. So with the loss of the deposit at Cripple Peak, there's really now a deadlock between the Council of 13 and the clans underneath the power of Clan Pestilens. And there's really just constant treachery. It falls down from a war of attrition into a kind of cold ratty war. And it remains that way until another great clan returns from the history books. This is the assassins of Clan Eshin, the Gutter Runners and the Night Runners, who are the great ninja rat assassins, the evil splinters, basically, return from the Far East and pledge allegiance to the Council of 13. So using the new agents and their amazing powers of stealth, shadow warfare, infiltration, assassination, they begin knocking out the leadership of Clan Pestilens, who really are now starting to crumble under the weight of their own success. They have an enormous number of Skaven warriors and plague priests, but an increasingly dwindling population of leaders. So you begin to get factional infighting, that kind of thing, within their own side. It is at that stage that Lord Nurglich, the leader of Clan Pestilens, marches by himself into Skavenblight and demands an audience with the Council of 13, who come to the steps of the great cathedral, on which Nurglich, in great ratty bravado, demands to become a member of the council. And he pulls his little robe aside, not to reveal any sort of ratty lipstick, but a vial of yellow fever, the most virulent disease that Clan Pestilens can create that would wipe out Skaven for tens of miles in every direction. And they've brought it into the council chamber at the heart of the Skaven Underempire.
Oh, sneaky bugger.
Snap.
So one of their number agrees to have a duel with Nurglich, and if they can be beaten, then they will become a member of the council. And Nurglich absolutely destroys him, absolutely rips him to shreds, and as he's doing it, the body of the former council member is just dissolving with disease as it continues. And Nurglich is therefore proclaimed a member of the Council of 13, and Clan Pestilens is so large that it is now considered one of the great clans.
Wow.
Even if Nurglich didn't defeat their great champion, he still had vials of like Skaven death around his waist. So he always had that trump card anyway. It's like, I'll fight this guy, and if I don't win, then fuck you all anyway. Poof!
Huh.
Given the Skaven's cowardly nature, I suspect the council were freaking out that he came by himself.
Where did Clan Pestilens go then? Did they just stay in Cripple Peak? Did they move back into Skavenblight? You know, did they set up holiday homes around the periphery? Like, what's the crack?
That's it. Drive out the locals, push up the price of residential homes in the area, and now it's just a
gentrify, ratrify.
Yeah, baristas and coffee shops everywhere.
Yeah, you raise an interesting point because Clan Pestilens didn't take Cripple Peak.
Oh.
Cripple Peak just fell off the radar. And in fact, what happened was Nagash had returned. Dun, dun, dun.
Shut the front door.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm guessing that's a story for another time.
Once we delve into that, from Nagash's perspective, it's a roller coaster ride.
Excellent.
You thought he was dead. Bombshell.
To answer your specific question, Clan Pestilens really owns the Southlands, but they do have, as all other great clans have, small fortresses and enclaves all around the Under Empire.
Right, okay.
Safe.
God, that was awesome. That was, that had me by the balls.
The Orcs are still my favourite race, but the Skaven are very interesting. The Orcs are just simple. They're like, no frills. We're here. We're queer. Get used to it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
No, wait. Sorry, wrong chant. We're here. We're Orcs. We like to fight. The Skaven are just, their history is intricate and interesting and meddling and
and ratty, cunning,
and ratty. Loads of rats.
I mean, I have to say the low point for me really was that attack on, because I again, like Chris was saying last episode, I do have a lot of respect for the dwarves and their technology and their ingenuity. And I can't really see how the Skaven would have had any other option other than to use such kind of underhand techniques to overcome dwarves than poison them, But that was a real low point in their history for me. I kind of feel like they lost a bit of my respect in that.
Well, I think a lot of it was foreshadowed by their own origin story. I mean, it's effectively the other side of how the Skaven came to be. If you remember from the Doom of Kavzar, the dwarves held up in their fortress, outside of which their human allies were trying to get in to ask for help and shelter, and all the while underneath, rodent doom was inching its way forward through the cracks and crevices of their own fortress.
Karma, bitches.
So is that the overlap then? Is that the parallel? Is that the timeline? No, because that story was from the beginning of the Skaven, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, that's why I used the word foreshadow.
Well, I noticed that you used that word, and I wanted to say good use of that word, but I wasn't sure what you meant, so I just we just moved on, you know?
Yeah, it was a good 2,000 years, but I only bring it up because it's, that's what the dwarves in the origin story would have experienced. They would have experienced attacks from the humans trying to get in at the very end, the kind of rat-based horror that was coming in from below.
Yeah. Dark.
Cracking.
So, Chris, you're a bit of you're a Skaven convertee now.
Yeah. I think, and the more that I learn about Warhammer, obviously, your preconceptions about races completely change. Especially, you kind of look at Warhammer and you just see the Skaven as just numbers and no substance. Do you know what I mean? They're just an annoyance, a common enemy between all the races, and there's nothing much to them. But the more you learn about them, actually, they're like you say, they're cunning and ratty and very smart, actually. And I'm respecting them more and more.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Chris Allen overcoming his ratophobia.
Whoa. Well, and on the contrary, my classically favorite race, the orcs, are a little bit dull by comparison. You know what I mean? They're just kind of hack 'em, smack 'em, bop 'em, twist 'em, smash it kind of peeps.
Bop it, smash it,
twist it, pull it, trombone this.
I mean, with that admission, I think I can quite safely say episode 7, best episode yet from me.
All right, get over yourself.
Wait till the next episode when we deal with how the Skaven interacted with the nations of the Old World. So you're looking at 2,000 years of history still to cover.
I am very excited. All right, that's all from us. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to find out more about the topics we've discussed in this podcast, you can find all the reference articles in the show notes. We'll be back again next month displaying just how little Chris and I know. Until then, see ya.
See ya.
Squeak, squeak.